What's up YouTube, Al2 here, WBFF Pro Fitness Model, and I've got a very good question from a fellow WBFF competitor last week, and his name is Trevon Edwards. Thank you so much for the support, bro. You've been showing me a lot of love and support lately, so it's a very good question also. I'll just read it out now, and the question is: could you do a quick Q&A video on your opinion of eating Snickers, Reeces cups, honey, etc. before you get on stage to enhance the look of your physique? So that's a really good question, Trevon. Okay, so what I want to start off by doing is actually breaking down the steps of what's in junk food and what makes a physique actually look peak when you're on stage. So the first thing I'll say is that junk food in isolation, junk food on its own, is not what's responsible for making you look peak on stage. So it's four things that we need to look at. The first thing I don't even want to discuss too much, because you basically need to be stage ready. So you need to be lean enough for a start to actually get on stage. So if you're not lean enough in the first place, any of the following three things are not really going to do much to enhance your physique or make it look any worse. So make sure you're stage shredded. I'm going to park that to the side now because that's not really something I can control. So I'm going to assume that you are already stage shredded. So the three things following on from that to make you look peak are your water intake, your carbohydrate intake, and your sodium intake as well. Now, again, I have to make some assumptions because I don't know what each individual's contest prep protocols were or what they've been advised by their coach. So I need to make some assumptions. So what I'm going to do is talk about the typical kind of bro science guru style contest prep peak week, or what some call depletion week, which I really don't understand the purpose of, but again, that's for another video. So a typical peak week or depletion week is loading up on water and then cutting water towards the end, the last few days, and on show day, not drinking any water at all. For your carbohydrates, again, if you're following this depletion week, which you should really have no business following, it makes no logical sense. I'm not even a science guy, but it makes no sense to me logically. You've been depleting surely for the whole time you've been on prep. You've been on lower carbs than your body would ideally like. So you're depleted. There's no need to go zero carbs, but that's what people do. They go zero carb for a few days, and then they start loading sort of 2 days out with high carbs. And then finally, sodium as well. They tend to just zero sodium. They tend to cut sodium out completely. So let's talk about these three things, and then we're going to relate this all back to junk food as well. So what they do is they cut water. Now, if you're cutting water on show day, or even a few days before leading up to show day and on show day, you're going to be flat. Because guess what? 70% of the water you store in your body is going to be stored intramuscularly, and that's where you want it to go. That's where you want it to be stored. 30% of it is going to be stored subcutaneously. So that's a pretty good ratio right there for you to look full, hard, and lean on stage. Well, not lean. You're going to be lean if you're lean. But you're going to look full and hard if your water levels are right. Now, if you remove water, now what's that going to do? Yes, you might lose a little bit of subcutaneous water, but you're also going to reduce water intramuscularly. That's why you're not going to look as hard and as full and as peak as you would like to. Let's move on to carbs. Most people get carbs right. They don't need to do a depletion week, but no matter what protocol you use, generally you get your carbs right. But carbs and water work synergistically. So if you are using carbs to fill you up, that will happen. But if you're now cutting out water, don't forget there's about 3 to 4 grams of water get pulled in for every gram of carbs you ingest. So that water is going to be pulled intramuscularly as well as a small amount subcutaneously. So you're not actually allowing your carbs to do their job if you are dehydrating yourself and restricting your water. Okay, and finally what people do is they completely cut out sodium. Now, again, if you're cutting out sodium, it makes no sense, because guess what? Cutting out sodium does not reduce your blood sodium levels. That might not make sense initially, but what the body does, again, the body is smarter than you are, so the body is it relies on sodium. That's another thing for survival. So when you limit your sodium, guess what? You're gonna stop pissing out sodium. So you're gonna retain more sodium because the body has detected that you are limiting and restricting your sodium. Another thing you're doing by reducing sodium is you're reducing your blood pressure. So you're not gonna look as hard and as veiny and vascular as you might do if you had sodium. In fact, I do the opposite on show day. I take a teaspoon of sodium, or salt, or whatever it is, or I pour soy sauce all over my food that day, because that's going to give you that hard vascular look, because your blood pressure is going to go up. Not to dangerous levels, but you're going to maintain sort of a good level of blood pressure. So let's bear in mind those three things. And a typical bro science prep is going to get 2 out of 3 of those things wrong. But by getting the 2 out of those 3 things wrong, you're also actually negating the third thing, which was carbs. The one thing you got right was carbs, but because they interact with the water and sodium, you're reducing the effectiveness of carb loading. Now, when do people most commonly look best? It's usually the day after their show. Most people get the peak week wrong. And what's the most common thing you hear after a show? Oh man, I look amazing, I wish I looked like this on show day. If that's the case, you fucked up, because you're supposed to look peak on show day. So how do we end up looking good on show day? And I want to relate this back to junk food. Now, junk food typically contains a lot of sodium, high in sodium. So your Snickers and your Reeces Pieces, they're going to be fairly high in sodium. The foods are going to be high in carbohydrates as well. So generally people get the carbs right, but if they've been depleting too much, then this could also play a part. So their carbs are going to be topped up, their glycogen levels are going to be topped up. So that's another thing. The third thing is they no longer care about restricting fluids. In fact, they're now gulping water down like it's going out of style, because they've been dehydrating themselves. So all of these things now work synergistically, and people the following day look peak. They look like how they should have looked on their show. Now, that's why junk food makes you look better, because generally you're having junk food with water, fluids, whatever. They're high in sodium, so your Reese's Pieces, your Snickers bar, and they're high in carbs. So finally, your body will peak. It's not because of the junk food, and I wouldn't recommend taking junk food willy-nilly just to peak, because it's not the junk food that's actually peaking. It's making sure your sodium's right, making sure your water's right, you're not dehydrating yourself because there's no need whatsoever, making sure your carbs are right. So if you hit all 3 of those things, then you're gonna look peak. So I hope that answers your question. It's not the junk food that makes you look better. It's what's in the junk food and the environment in which you're consuming the junk food, i.e. with fluids. Alright, I hope that helps, Travon. Any questions, give me some feedback in the comment section below, and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and there'll be lots of content to come.